Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about chapter 11 in your textbook, Informing and Persuading. I will also be talking a little bit about both your informative paper assignment and your persuasive paper assignments in this lecture. So if you want some extra help, that'll be here in this video lecture. And also there's a lot of good advice in this chapter of your textbook as well. So we're going to start with talking about presentation opportunities in general, and then the purpose of presentations. Then we'll talk about Aristotle's 3 persuasive appeals, types of reasoning, and then specifically informing and persuading. And as I said, we will be talking a little bit about both of your informative and persuasive paper assignments here today as well. But first, let's get into presentation opportunities. So this is the first step in the presentation process, and there's 2 types of presentation opportunities for which you can prepare. The first is a formal presentation, which occurs in a traditional presentation setting. So like presenting a sales pitch to a client, giving a progress report at a district meeting. These are examples of formal presentations. But there's also opportunity presentation, and this is identical in preparation and presentation to a formal presentation, but it occurs in a less traditional setting. For instance, many organizations have huddles or weekly meetings, which are periods during which employees are pulled together to talk. And there's also impromptu presentations, but this is just writing or speaking off the cuff. So there's no preparation involved. And if you do well here, do not be fooled into thinking that you do not need to practice or prepare for a presentation. If you have had success in sort of impromptu presentations settings, think about how much better it could be if you had practice. I kind of think about this like I think about past arguments I've had with people, you know, how you're reflecting on it and you're like, oh, I wish I said this. Same kind of thing here. So it's important when you have the opportunity to do so to prepare for presentations, whether they're formal or opportunity. So now we'll get into the general purposes of presentation. We're going to talk about 2 general purposes here, to inform and persuade. Presentations can also have the purpose of entertainment, but typically you don't really see that in formal work-related presentations. In fact, if this class was in person, we would do one of each of these types of presentations, but due to the online asynchronous format, we're doing the 2 to 3 page papers in lieu of these presentations, which again, I'm going to provide additional guidance for both these assignments throughout this lecture. So keep a lot of the things that we're going to talk about here in mind when you're working on these assignments. In an informative purpose presentation, you present the facts. So teachers relaying information is an example of having an informative purpose, or me giving this lecture. A persuasive purpose is when you act as an advocate or make an argument. So your role is to advocate for or against something. And you can have some different kinds of goals in your persuasive purpose. For example, passive agreement, in which you want to persuade the audience to simply agree or disagree with an idea. So an example at work could be like to support a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative like inclusive hiring. You don't need anyone to be involved, but you do want general support. There's also active agreement or call to action, in which you persuade the audience to take some sort of action. Like become an organ donor or vote to unionize, something like that. A specific purpose is a declarative sentence telling the listeners what you want them to understand, know, or believe by the end of your presentation. So this is very similar to the thesis statement in your papers. In this video, I do want you to understand the difference between informing and persuading and how to do each of them successfully, and how to phrase your specific purpose based on either of these 2 purposes, to inform or to persuade. Now we're going to talk about Aristotle's 3 persuasive appeals. Ethos refers to your credibility as a presenter, as well as the credibility of the information being delivered in your presentation. So in order to appeal to people's ethos, you want to demonstrate positive character so that you have the audience's and listeners' best interests at heart, and demonstrate your subject matter expertise so that you know what you're talking about. Logos is the words of a presentation in the context of organizational structure and supporting information. So you want to support everything that you're saying with things like definitions, examples, statistics, and quotes to demonstrate that logically what you're talking about does make sense and it is relevant. And then pathos refers to emotional appeal, and we can do this by using words that have strong connotations. Now we'll get into the different types of reasoning that you can use as an audience member or try to influence your audience members to engage in by the words that you use. So the first is inductive reasoning, in which you build an argument by using individual examples, pieces of information, or cases, and then pulling them all together to make a generalization to come to a conclusion. An example would be, I got bad customer service at Apple. My friend got bad customer service at Apple, and my boss got bad customer service at Apple. So therefore, we can conclude that Apple gives bad customer service. So obviously, this is a little bit of a hasty generalization, so you have to be careful about that when using this type of reasoning. So you have to make sure that you have enough information to like more definitively support the conclusion you are coming to. Otherwise, this will not work. There's also causal reasoning, in which you demonstrate that certain events or factors or causes produced, and in some cases prevented, a certain result or the effect. So cause and effect. An example would be vaccines protect against viruses. We know this to be true. There's plenty of scientific evidence to support this. This is objective fact. Deductive reasoning is when the speaker takes general information or premises and draws a conclusion from that general information. So an example of this would be, plants need water and sunlight to grow. My plant grew, so therefore my plant got enough water and sunlight. We also have analogical reasoning, which is reasoning from an analogy. And we do this by making an argument by comparing two cases. When we do this, we must point out the differences between the two things we're comparing and minimize them. An example of this is, I studied in high school and I got good grades. So if I study in college, I will get good grades. Although college is often harder and requires more self-regulation, the same principles of teaching and learning and completing assignments apply. So therefore, if I study, I should do well just as I did in high school. We also have cognitive dissonance, and this is not actually a formal form of reasoning, but it's important to understand as it can create a feeling of discomfort for the person experiencing it. And it's defined as when a person holds two ideas that contradict each other, and it creates mental noise or cognitive dissonance in that person's mind. So if you develop an argument that creates cognitive dissonance, but then offer a solution that reduces that contradiction, you are more likely to have a successful persuasive argument. An example of this is, if you're telling me all the ways that single-use plastics are bad, but we need plastic, I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I'm using plastic water bottles every day, but you're telling me that they're bad. But you give me ways to reduce my plastic consumption, like having a refillable water bottle, that will reduce my cognitive dissonance and empower me to do something about it, like using that water bottle. So now we're going to get into talking about the purpose of informing specifically and how to best structure those types of arguments. So first, we want to develop a clear, specific purpose. So begin by making certain that the general purpose of the speech is to inform. We don't want to share our emotions or opinion. We simply want to convey information. So be sure to analyze your audience and the context carefully in doing this. Be objective. Again, do not incorporate your own emotions or opinions. Know your audience. Pay careful attention to your audience's level of knowledge and understanding when you're doing audience analysis. You do not want to design a speech that informs them about things they already know. It is a waste of your time and it's a waste of their time, and they might kind of tune out. But by the same token, if your audience only has basic knowledge of information about a topic and you design the speech as if they were Xers, they will not be able to comprehend the information. I am your audience for both of your papers. So whatever topic you choose, consider my level of knowledge about your informative topic in your use of jargon and etc. And whether you need to like define and let me know what these things mean. You want to effectively use ethos and logos in informative presentations or papers. So try to incorporate a variety of supporting material like definitions, examples, statistics, and quotes. And these things will make certain that you will appeal to all types of listeners, and it will make your speech more memorable. Now for persuading. A lot of these things are similar, but it is different when you keep in mind the goal that you're trying to get your audience or listener to agree with something, or maybe even do something. So develop a clear specific purpose once again, but in this case, you are subjective, influenced, or affected by individual emotions, biases, or point of view. Depending on your topic, it may be a good strategy to start with some sort of statement of positionality as you are related to the topic you chose, but it depends on your audience. As important as it is to both acknowledge these emotion biases and points of view and demonstrate your credibility to account for them, with touchier topics, it might be better to draw them in first by piquing their interest before you kind of reveal this information. But again, it depends on the sensitivity of the topic and also analyzing your audience. So when you're persuading, it's important to establish common ground with your audience, which means to show how you have some shared interest, concern, or background as it is related to your topic. If your audience believes that you share their attitude toward a topic, it increases your ability to persuade them. Again, I am your audience, so when you write your persuasive paper, try to account for any pre-existing attitudes or biases that I may have toward your persuasive topic, in addition to my mere knowledge about the subject, like with your informative papers. In persuasive arguments, you want to use ethos, logos, and pathos. So demonstrate your credibility and help your audience believe that you and the information or the argument you are presenting is true. And don't be afraid to use the emotional appeal to get them to, buy into the importance of your topic or whatever you're trying to get them to agree with. And finally, organize your argument with smooth transitions. So first you want to gain interest, and then spark motivation throughout your presentation or paper, and then finish strong, leaving them with some sort of memorable statement that not only sticks in their mind, but helps them agree and buy into the importance that you believe in the topic that you're speaking or writing about. So that's all for today. We went over the kinds of presentation opportunities that we'll have in the workplace, like formal, opportunity, and impromptu. We went over the purposes of presentation, focusing specifically on informative and persuasive purposes and developing our specific purposes within that. And in persuasive purpose, whether we want them to passively agree or actively agree or subscribe to some sort of call of action. We talked about Aristotle's 3 persuasive appeals: ethos, which has to do with credibility; logos, which has to do with the actual supporting information and words that you use; and pathos, which is emotional appeal. We talked about inductive reasoning, causal reasoning, deductive reasoning, analogical reasoning, and cognitive dissonance. And then we talked about specifically informing and persuading, and hopefully gave you some help with your informative and persuasive paper assignments. That is all for today, and I will see you in chapter 12.